And good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 2023 Post-Legislative Session Roast. Did I say roast? I'm sorry, I meant breakfast. Glad you could be here today. My name is Carter Patterson. I am the president of the Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club, and we are honored to partner with the Chamber on this event. And if you are looking for a Rotary Club, we are a service organization here in the county, one of 5 clubs. We're the largest club, so we meet every Tuesday morning, promptly at 7:30. And if you are looking to abide by our motto of service above self, we are always looking for new members to help raise money for charities in Forsyth County. And if you look at the back of your program today, there's a big flyer for the biggest party of the year in Forsyth County, which is our Down in Derby event. And last year we raised over $65,000 for local charities, and we'd love to have you join us. So with that, enjoy your breakfast, but I'm going to hand off to Mr. James McCoy, President of the Forsyth County Chamber of Commerce.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, Carter. All right, so I am not used to wearing a lapel mic, so can you all hear me okay? Is that all right? The two? Okay, very good. All right, well, welcome. Thank you all for joining us for this morning's breakfast. Thank you to the Lanier Forsyth Rotary Club for joining us. I know, and I say this every time because it is important to know, it is not easy for a Rotary Club to decide to move its regular meeting location, and we respect that a great deal, and thank you for coming. But we're very glad to have you, and always honored to partner with the club. So my name's James McCoy. I work for all of you as the president of the Chamber of Commerce. And you know, but this morning I want to get us kicked off by talking about a number of things that we've been working on this past year before we get into the meat of the program, and some of our successes this past year. So far, since the beginning of January, the Forward Forsyth team, which is the economic development partnership of Forsyth County, led by Alex, Alex is somewhere in here. There he is, out there doing his job, I think. And the partnership includes Forsyth County Schools, our Development Authority, and the Board of Commissioners, as well as the University of North Georgia and Lanier Tech. We have announced 2 projects so far since January, totaling 90 new jobs and over $32 million of new capital investment, which is not a bad first quarter. The Chamber's tourism entity, Discover FOCO, continues to produce record-breaking numbers this year. Hotel leads are up 209% from this time last year, showing that interest in Forsyth County as a sports, business, and leisure destination continues to climb, bringing in more temporary taxpayers who invest in our community financially, but rarely detract from the services provided to residents. This year, our local hotels have already generated $2.6 million in taxable revenue, an 11% increase year to date from 2022's numbers. And so that is a remarkable way to get the year started. I also want to thank our host today, Astro Celebrations. This venue at one time was a hardware store. It's a little different today. It's absolutely beautiful, and thank our hosts very much for their support. Today's breakfast offers our business leaders and members of the community to access our elected officials and insights about their time in session. And let me recognize a few of our non-presenting elected officials who are joining us this morning. From the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, Chairman Alfred John, as well as Commissioners Carrie Hill and Laura Simonson. And I received a message this morning that Commissioner Mills is joining us online this morning. So thank you all for being with us and joining us online. From the Board of Education, members Lindsay Adams, Tom Cleveland, and Mike Valdez, thank you for joining us. And Forsyth County School Superintendent Dr. Jeff Bearden, thank you all for joining us this morning. We appreciate you being here. We, of course, can't do this work without the financial support of our sponsors and those championing today's event. Our breakfast sponsor this morning is Georgia Power. Our coffee sponsor is AT&T. Our host sponsor, Astro Celebrations. our supporting sponsors, the University of North Georgia and Country Inn & Suites. So thank you all very much for your financial support of this morning. I'd also like to extend a personal thank you to our delegation for joining us this morning. We know that your time is extraordinarily valuable and in demand, and we appreciate you making us a priority this morning. We want to dedicate most of our time to your questions for our delegation. A few questions were submitted during the registration process, and we'll get to those questions first. And then we'll take submitted question if time allows, and we'll also be asking for your participation during the program. The Wi-Fi network is up at the very top of the screen, as well as information on how to participate in our audience polling. For those of you who have participated in these events in the past, it's the exact same as we have done in the past. To participate in the poll, you can send a text to James McCoy 350 to 22333, or you can scan the QR code, and it will take you to our to the app that will let you participate. So we're going to go ahead and try it out and make sure that everyone do so. We have a really challenging question for everybody. We want to find out, what did you do over spring break? And we're going to do this to test it out. The most common words are going to come up on a word cloud. So we'll give you just a few minutes. Work. Boy, you guys are crazy. Work, beach, home. Fishing. Well, there's some interesting things up here. I'm assuming honey means honeydew list. And castles. Fishing, improvements. Miami. Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Have Representative Todd Jones. Representative Jones is the Vice Chairman of the Technology and Infrastructure Innovation Committee. He is on several other committees which are listed on the screen. Also joining us today is Representative Lauren McDonald. Representative McDonald serves as the governor's floor leader and is part of many committees listed on the screen. I also want to mention that Representative Brent Cox could not be with us today. He and I spoke a couple of times over the last week, and he is tending to a very important family matter. And we wish him well with that. So please join me in thanking all of our delegation for spending their time with us today. All right, we're now going to shift to the questions. I'm going to start with a question for each of you. That will be the same question, then we'll move on to the submitted questions. So first, I'd like to ask each of you, and we've got the mic with Representative Jaspers at the moment, so we'll start there. Other than some of the major statewide initiatives, could you each please tell us what you accomplished and or sponsored during the session that was a direct benefit for Forsyth County residents and taxpayers?
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting us be here today. And just to get started, excuse me, I want to thank, a lot of people. If you don't know this, that the majority of us after redistricting are new to Forsyth County. I think that's important for you to know that 5 out of the 8 of us are new. And, there's been a lot of folks who've reached out to me, and a few of them are in this room, to take me on tours, to call me, to take me around. And I think that's true for the others too, to make sure that we understand the issues of Forsyth County, James. And I just want to make sure I say that and appreciate that. What I worked on this year is what I worked on for the last couple of years of transportation issues. Fortunately, I've been the chairman of that for the past 3 years. And we had an emerging issue came up, electric vehicles. I know there's a number of them out in the parking lot as I drove around trying to find a parking place. They're here. Georgia's an innovator, a leader in the electric vehicle industry. But also, we had to figure out ways, number one, about the chargers. And I spent last year studying them, and Senator Gooch and I worked very hard this year to pass a bill that made sure that 2 things, that we taxed electric vehicles appropriately on their electricity that's used as an energy source for travel. A lot more complex than you thought, because there's a lot of big players in this. And it took us about a year to get a bill together, touched on throughout the year. I looked back when I was driving over here this morning, how much time I spent creating the bill that ended up being Senate Bill, I think 146. But that's what I worked on most. And we made sure that we inspect those electric vehicle charging stations. We expect them for safety and accuracy. And plus, we need to know where they're at. We also made sure that the revenue department is actively engaged in collecting the tax. And so just think about it. When you drive today, you're riding your car around, you pay a tax on that gasoline. We just want to make sure that the electric vehicles are doing the same as they drive through. I know some people, everyone who has one charges at home, but we're really recognizing the commercial aspects of it that are coming, and also people traveling through the state. James, I spent most of my time on that, and a lot of it, and on a lot of other issues, unfortunately on a lot of very important committees that absorb all my time. And when we're there from January through March, it's all in.
Thank you. Representative Barrett.
Good morning. Wow, how great to be back in the nest with all of our great friends from Rotary and the Chamber and everyone else. Freshman year, just unbelievable. The first 3 weeks you're there is total bewilderment, trying to just figure out what's what. And then after about a month, you sort of settle in and get into the rhythm. Local legislation, I've always said, and I even campaigned on, what is a really good representative? And I thought I answered the question myself. I thought, a great representative leaves a legacy so that long after they're gone, there are things that benefit our community that are, and 2 good examples of that are Lanier Tech and University of North Georgia. I mean, a lot of us in the room, Mary Helen and many others in here who are very active in both and securing both of those things for Forsyth County. And I thought those are things that happen as a collaboration between local elected officials, a lot of individuals in the community helping out, the folks at the Capitol, and kind of a collaboration to bring the resources to get those things done. And so the things that I'm most proud of and hope to accomplish for us have to do with local issues. One issue that I'm very proud of, for example, is working very closely with our school board and our superintendent over there on the floating homestead exemption, which they led the charge on to sort of put some parameters around and create a stability out there so that citizens, their property taxes will be less volatile in potentially inflationary environment in a way that was very secure for the school system, but also created kind of an insurance policy. But that was a good example of where our school board and our superintendent and our delegation worked very closely together to collaborate to come up with a good outcome for everyone. And so things like that, working with the Board of Elections on other issues. And I won't preempt, but supporting legislation that other folks up here on our panel introduced this year. There's so much done this year. It's almost a deluge of things to talk about, probably not enough time. So look forward to jumping in. One thing I will tell you this is we have a formidable delegation at the Capitol now. Everybody up here, these guys have so much experience, such strong relationships, such strong connections at the Capitol that, and they're too humble to say it about themselves, but these guys are absolutely hooked up down at the Capitol in a way with the right relationships to deliver great results for our county. And we'll get into that later.
Well, thanks, Carter. I appreciate it. I'm not going to take too much of the steam from down there because I have a feeling in terms of what they're going to hit. So let me just go ahead and do a quick laundry list. I think for us, if you look at the rubric is always Forsyth County first, the state, and then I think everything else third. I think in terms of the things that got across the line or that we tried to get across the line that we think can get there next year, in no particular order, I think definitely we're going to be able to get education impact fees next year. The challenge this year was we skinnied it down. Big kudos to Greg. Figured out a way to skinny down education impact fees to just impact Forsyth County. The challenge is now we have districts that want it, but we're trying to convince them, let us show you that it can work, and then we'll come back to you guys. So that's going to be the discussion over the summer. The accreditation bill was huge. One of the things we've been working on, not just with some members of the school board, but also with the delegation, was making sure that as we are accrediting K-12 schools, the only two things that matter, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and financial stewardship. We wanted to make sure that that third, I'll say the third leg of the stool was not a consideration within accreditation, and we were able to swipe that out. The third thing in terms of the K-12 budget is, as you can see, there's a little bit of a theme here in terms of education. The K-12 budget is fully funded. We will move over $13 billion into K-12 from the state alone. That's the most the state has ever invested into K-12. But I would ask you to always be considering this. And for those of you who've been here before, you know I'm going to say it. If we do not solve the birth to 4 problem, we could literally make that 1326 and it will not matter. It will not matter. So we need to not just be so focused on K-12, but also on birth to 4. And the good news is the speaker has put together an early childhood committee, effectively looking at how we look at birth to 4. And there's 5 folks that have been appointed from the House. I was thankful that I was one of those 5 that was chosen. I'm a huge believer that if we solve birth to 4, we can nearly solve almost every other challenge within the state of Georgia, and happy about that. In terms of school choice, I want to let Greg hit that. Finally, Carter, you hit not just the libraries, but also linear tech. We were happy to see that that was in the bond package. Mary Helen said it very well this morning. Until the governor signs it, it's not in the bond package, but right now it looks like it will be there. There is 2 things I want to make sure that you guys understand coming off of what Rick said. EV, absolutely. When you look at peak fuel, we think sometime in 2025, 2026, we're going to see peak fuel usage. And then at some point, we're going to start seeing a crescent down. That is a function of not just consumers wanting EVs and wanting hybrids, but also the CAFE standards that come out of the Fed. By the time we get to the end of the 2020s, the CAFE standards will be up in the 40s. So I think at the end of the day, we will see peak fuel sometime at the middle of this decade. So us being able to replace the excise tax in some function to be able to handle the roads is super important. And then finally, please make sure you ask this question, not just of us, but also of Congressman McCormick, et cetera. What bill did you kill? This delegation worked, trying to find the right word because we're on TV. This delegation worked very hard to ensure that local control was not taken from our communities. There was a huge move this year to take local control away from our Board of Commissioners, city councils, et cetera. We worked really hard to kill that bill. So we know that what makes the paper is what bill was passed or what budget item was in there. What doesn't make the paper is what happens behind the scenes to ensure that certain bills are killed, that basically move Forsyth in the right direction. We believe in Chairman John. We believe in Ms. Mills. We believe in Ms. Hill, et cetera. I'm sorry, I'm not going to name all 5 of them, but you all get my point. We believe in Mayor Brumbelow. We wanted to make sure that local control maintained. There was a huge move to move local control out. We killed that bill, and we're happy that we did it, and we're excited about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, James. Poor Todd Levant got left out of that message. That's all right. I'll mention Todd. No, first of all, in my house, there are a lot of times that I don't hear my wife, but I did hear in your opening speech the hotel motel part of your speech, so it was clear, even that I don't listen to my wife a lot of times. But as far as the House and the Senate, we had a lot of leadership changes from the top all through the leadership. So that was a big change for what Greg, Todd, and Rick Jaspers have been through, seeing your new lieutenant governors, new speakers. So that, getting to know their style and that, they also have their agenda too, that they're putting in a place with their leadership team. So that was something that we all have to work within some parameters to work with and work through, that we all had to learn this session. Something that was important to me is the floating homestead exemption and how we got there. I want to thank the delegation and thank the Board of Education and the superintendent and Mitch Young, the deputy superintendent. We didn't just start right at the session to get that through. I mean, it's something that Senator Dolezal had been working with over a few years, and then we had meetings, continuously had meetings to get there, to get to a comfort zone on that. And of course, appreciate Representative Barrett getting that across the finish line through the House and then through the Senate with Steele and with Senator Dolezal. Something that, we're talking about EVs, it's a learning curve for me. I drove my first Tesla this past week, last weekend in Cincinnati. I rented it to go to my son's lacrosse game, and it scared the hell out of me. I mean, I sat there and I kept watching that little battery thing go down and go down as I'm driving from lacrosse match to lacrosse match. And as I'm driving, I'm in Ohio looking for a charging station, and I couldn't find one. So I returned that thing with like 14% battery back to the airport. I said, I think I've done my EV thing for a while, because, I ride around Georgia and I see EV stations all the time, but up north, I couldn't find one. So, but yesterday I was driving through Lambert, dropping my daughter off at school in carpool, and I had my son who was about to go back to boarding school, and he counted 14 Teslas as we rode through the carpool line. So it is growing. We used to count leaves, so we're counting Teslas this time. So it's something that's important to our transportation industry. And fortunately, we've got Rick Jaspers in the delegation now as chairman of transportation. Chairman Dolezal just took over transportation and Senate. So that only is not going to be great for Georgia. It's going to be great for Forsyth County and this delegation moving forward. So I look forward to working with them on transportation issues as my first year being on the Transportation Committee. Get blamed a lot by Representative Barrett that I stole Transportation Committee from him. And so that's our continuous battle between us. But he just didn't cook the right cookies for Chairman Jaspers. But two bills that I do, being a governor's floor leader, I am limited on what I'm allowed to carry. I carried out HB 162, which was the $1 billion tax rebate to Georgians, which was a $500 rebate for if you've paid your taxes for joint, and $250 for single. And also another one was important to Georgians that doesn't get a lot of limelight was HB 163. It was a student loan payment plan of $120,000 over 5 years to try to recruit and retain medical examiners. We have spots for 19 medical examiners in the headquarters at GBI, and we only have 8 in the whole state for almost 11 million people. And it's a pretty serious issue, and it's not just Georgia, it's nationwide. So I'm working with the governor's office to also put another plan to grow that, the program within medical examiners. Something else I'll talk about a little later, but I just want to thank James, the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club on here Forsyth for having us today. It's important to me. My wife asked me yesterday, she says, are you going to go back to Rotary? I said, honey, I've been in Rotary for 27 years. Yes, I'm going back to Rotary. It's just a little sabbatical we have to take being in Atlanta, but I do love our Rotary Club and what it does for our community.
Thank you. So if Lauren does not listen to his wife, I listen to Lauren's wife, and I do whatever she tells me to do. I'm in a rare position being part of the Forsyth delegation because I'm wedged between Forsyth, which is a highly functional delegation, compared to I'm one of 29 members of the Fulton delegation and one of 22 in the Gwinnett delegation. And if you want to talk about pure dysfunction and people coming in with wild and crazy different agendas, just look at Fulton and Gwinnett. So thank God I can be here with Forsyth today. But as my district, the geography of it, that's where I am. So I'm equal thirds of those three counties. As an incoming freshman, the wildest lesson that I learned was I carried a gas-powered leaf blower protection bill that seemingly was pretty innocuous, and it became the Christmas tree bill of the legislative session. So if you can imagine going through all the steps to pass through the Senate chamber, and then when it crossed over, the House decided to attach 5 other bills. So my little 3-page bill became an 85-page bill without any authorization of mine. And then I'm now responsible for a total of 6 bills. And so trying to navigate that in the different committees and the authors of those bills and the function, and the word germane is used a lot. You know, what is germane about this? Absolutely nothing. But they can find a way. And if you hire the right lawyers and the smartest people to figure it out, they'll kind of guide you along the way. So we shed some of the more difficult pieces of that and passed a much cleaner bill on that. It's awaiting the governor's signature now, but you'll be able to continue to use your gas blowers. You'll continue to use your gas stoves. And so that was the important part that came out of that. But as far as really meaningful legislation, because I am vice chair of state and local government, we're involved in so many aspects of the city and the county level of every county and city around the state. But to be also on the Senate Transportation Committee and being with Chairman Dolezal on, and Chairman Jaspers, of course, and passing truck weights, which I'll let them talk about. We came very close to passing tort reform. In a few areas, I think we're going to bring some of that back. Working very closely with Greg also on school choice, and that was his major mountain of work. I had a very small piece of it, and hopefully we'll be able to do a little bit of that next year as well. And then the one that Representative Barrett and I did that was probably the most rewarding for us was really building a partnership of strength with our friends from India. The Indian community has been overlooked for a long time on a statewide basis, not so much here locally, but for a community that makes up 1% of our population, but 6% of our tax basis, and a community that commits virtually no crimes and are truly the most model citizens that we have. Carter and I were able to do a really great thing for the people of India and honoring them. And hopefully this will result in more trade partnerships with them as well. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to represent you and our part of South Forsyth that I cover. And of course, the man that covers the rest of Forsyth County is my good friend, Chairman Dolezal.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Honestly, everything that I was going to mention probably has already been mentioned. I think that I would like to unpack, though, our only constitutional responsibility, which is the budget. I served this year for the first time ever as the vice chairman of appropriations in the Senate, so was part of a lot of meetings that I didn't even know existed before. So there's a meeting called Green Door that apparently back in the day, this meeting took place in a broom closet that had a green door, but it's where the real budget decisions are made on each side. And so I was able to participate in those. And we saw, there's a tremendous upside to being a pro-business state, and there's a tremendous downside to not being one. Thankfully, the voters of Georgia decided last November that we're going to remain a pro-business state. And so we had a surplus that we were able to return some of that. Lauren's bill returned $1 billion. There's another $950 million property tax credit to offset the record increases that we've seen in property taxes. So, excuse me, it serves as a nice bridge to get our constituents from this year until the year that we pass, hopefully the voters pass the floating homestead exemption, because that still goes before y'all. All that we did was gave you the opportunity to vote on providing some guardrails to how much your property taxes can increase every year. But for years, we've been hearing every year that I've been in the delegation from the Board of Education about the need for increased ratios of school counselors. Somebody has this recommended ratio. I don't know where the recommendation comes from. Dr. Bearden could tell you, but for the first time ever, we're funding that at their recommended level because we have that surplus and we're able to do that. We provided school safety grants for the second time in the 5 years that I've been in the legislature. We'll have tens of thousands of dollars for each school to allocate towards school safety. And we were reminded once again, unfortunately, how important that need is. There's a lot that we do, and then a lot that we kind of don't even understand that we have to do. And part of the important part of this role is your ability to leverage influence to bring money back home. And two areas that we worked together to do that on this year was the second tranche of funding for the Denmark Library. We received funding for the Denmark Library in the bond package, I think 3 years ago. Costs have gone like this. I think that the latest estimate Anna could tell us was about a $2 million overage. And so we had an ask for the state to come in and provide an additional $1 million to help us bridge that gap of that overage that's in the budget that hopefully will be signed. And then additionally, there's some FF&E money for the coming campus of UNG, which not only serves our college students here locally, but also as our primary outlet for students that are involved in dual enrollment. And we funded the building project that's under construction. This year, the FF&E funding was in there. And we had some additional money at the very last minute that we were able to provide an additional $1 million above and beyond the FF&E money already in there. And so that's just something that you kind of do in the process of passing bills, in addition to the kind of all of the other stuff, the stopping and the passing and the bringing of money back home. The last thing I'll talk about is truck weights. Truck weights came out of Chairman Jasper's committee, got changed in our committee on the Senate side, went to a conference committee. But this was a pretty difficult topic because you had the business community asking for increased truck weights because we've been living under an executive order that provided increased truck weights during COVID that Governor Kemp signed that expired with about 2 weeks left to go in session. And on the other side of that argument, you had the commissioner of GDOT, Russell McMurray, ACCG, which is the Associated Group of County Commissioners, I'm not sure what it stands for, and GMA, which is all your cities. They were all coming out saying, don't increase truck weights. So we had to find a way to split the baby. And the original ask was to go to 90,000 pounds from the current 84,000 pounds. But we heard pretty clearly locally that this was something that Forsyth County commissioners and our road department did not want. So we were in a difficult position because people with higher pay grades than us were asking us to move a bill. And locally, we were being asked to kill the bill. So worked with Senator Gooch, who used to be part of this delegation, and we came up with a way to ensure that Forsyth County would not be impacted, but that rural Georgia would still get what they needed in terms of increased truck weights. So we have a carve out in the truck weight bill that excludes the non-attainment zones, of which Forsyth, Cherokee, Fulton, Gwinnett counties are all a part of. So the increased truck weights can happen in the areas where they need it the most, but it essentially won't touch Metro Atlanta, that increase. And then we put a sunset in that bill as well, that sunsets at 2 years. And the reason we put that in there is we have a pretty significant funding issue as it relates to transportation. We spend about $3 billion a year on infrastructure for the state, road infrastructure for the state, statewide. And just to put that in perspective, the 285, 400 interchange costs $1 billion. So if you think about the state of Georgia with $3 billion, and you think about Post Road as another example, that's $120 million to widen, that $3 billion moves pretty quickly. So we want to bring call it the transportation industry, the trucking industry, the rail industry, all of the stakeholders back together to talk about our funding options as it moves forward around transportation. And the truck weight sunset gives us some leverage to get them back to the table so they'll have the conversation with us that we can hopefully get them to help us invest in our infrastructure moving forward.
So on this topic, we've had a lot of questions submitted about transportation and transportation-related items. So one of the questions that was submitted related to the truck weights bill. In the recent weight bill that passed the legislature, the Senate added higher weight fees for all overweight trucks while only giving a few industries the clearance to haul the higher weights. Why is it necessary to penalize all industries?
So existing code has certain carve-outs for exemptions. So this is going to get pretty heady, and I'll try to keep it simple, and then Chairman Jaspers can expound upon this if you'd like to. On the current interchange system, the truck weight limit is 80,000 pounds. There's a current variance to go 4,000 additional pounds for certain industry like forestry, agriculture, solid waste, et cetera, can go to 84, but they can only do that on state and local roads. They cannot do that on the interstate system. Then the ask was to take that carve out and increase it, and we increased it to 88. We did it for the industries that we thought needed it the most, that we were hearing the most from, which was the forestry and ag commissions. And remember, this is only within a 150-mile radius of the point of origin. It's really technical as to where they can have that extra weight because they can't get on the interstate system, which if you want to go anywhere in Georgia at scale, you have to use the interstate system. So I think ultimately the question is a valid question, which is why carve out any industry? The answer is we probably shouldn't. But the political reality caused us to land where we landed. Why is there pushback on this? Why do the locals not want it? What's the counter argument? We heard in testimony that 88,000 pound trucks would decrease the lifespan of a road from 20 years to 12 years. We heard other testimony that it was from 20 years to 18 years. Whether, let's just say that let's just call it from 20 to 15 and we split the difference and say that that's correct. The GDOT commissioner told me he thought that would have an additional cost of $500 million on state roads alone for maintenance. That does not account for what essentially equates to an unfunded mandate on the locals, which causes them to have to repave their roads more frequently as well. So we can't just say, hey, we're just going to go crazy on the roads and we'll figure out how to pay for it later. We've got to figure out how to pay for it. So what we did this year was a very limited carve out to keep our number one industry in the state of Georgia, which is agriculture, keep that industry moving as they have been able to do during COVID, but also a lot for the reality that this is a multi-billion-dollar conversation that we're having that we need to have moving forward. Chairman?
Thank you. Why do we do it? It's for safety. In the bill, there are 3 graduated set of fines. And, excuse me, when I had the bill come to my committee, that was something I demanded up front. That we had a fine structure so that if a logger, feed hauler, et cetera, were to break the law, to be found overweight, that hurt. If you're just a little bit overweight, it hurts a little, medium, and if you're way overweight, it hurts, and you won't make any money on that load. Well, if you're in the business of agriculture, which I've been in all my life, you're going to find a way to be below weight, at weight, maybe a little over, maybe right at it, because you can't afford it. The overage, the amount of money you make on hauling a load of logs or whatever it is in agriculture is very slim. And so that's why we put it in there, to make sure that for safety, for accuracy, make sure that the industry did what we wanted them to. It's to stay. And then again, too, when a bill comes to you and you're the chairman of a committee like transportation, and Greg will tell you, we're the referees many times. And, like you said, there are many powerful people and industries that wanted this, many that didn't. And my role was to be the referee. The first hearing I had was 6 hours long. Had 90 questions made by committee members. So these bills are highly debated. They're very passionate. And you as a chairman have to make sure that you give everybody the opportunity to talk about them. But the weight thing was really my thing, to make sure that I had the industry do what we wanted to. Whatever the weight ended up being, the penalty structure was going to be in there. And also, I want you to think about something. We see, as Greg talked about, we are underfunding freight and logistics, the big roads across our state, but we're also underfunding law enforcement. We have motor carrier division that inspects trucks every day across our state. There's not enough of them. They're not. And unfortunately, many of them are being pulled into the city of Atlanta to calm down the riots that happen. And on the weekends, they're still doing it to make sure the speeders and drag racers and just ruffians are held in check. So they're pulling our motor carriers who are law enforcement, just like they're pulling DNR agents and Georgia Highway Patrol into the city. That's something we've got to look at funding, how we get more of them, and also how Atlanta takes care of their own problems.
So related to all of this, I mean, we've funding, and it's not a new topic as it relates to transportation, but when looking out ahead at the future needs, certainly freight and logistics, but also just the growth of the state, and layering on top of that the discussion around EVs and gas tax money going down, number of electric vehicles going up. When you look ahead, what do you see as the path forward of funding transportation for the future of Georgia? And when? I know we've now been, 2 sessions ago since the last big, or maybe 3, since the last big funding bill. But what do you look at when you look ahead? 6.
House Bill 170, the year that it was passed, was probably the biggest bill in the General Assembly that year. I had been in the legislature about 3 years at the time, and it was huge. Now we're looking at doing something similar down the road because we have to. Georgia's growing over leaps and bounds. We need roads, but we also need money to be able to do public-private partnerships, to do our share. You'll see on the bigger roads that are coming are going to be public-private partnerships. We'll use private equity and other business models to fund these roads, because as Greg showed you just a minute ago, the $3 billion, you have to be realistic in thinking about it. There's 159 counties and untold cities that are all trying to draw from that $3 billion, plus the local money that some have T-SPLOS, some don't, some have area T-SPLOS, so that they can fund the road needs in their community. We're looking right now, Senator Gooch and I have had 3 years to look at it, and we kind of come up with an idea of how we can fund freight and logistics. But doing that will free up a lot of money that can be used in the local systems, James. And that means throughout the state of Georgia, not just in the freight and logistics corridors that we're really the most worried about. And I think generally the public is worried about the corridors too, because that's where they see the trucks right up beside them, ever increasing numbers, because the port, as you all know, is a giant success. And so we've got to make sure that we have the funds to do a I-16, I-75 truck only lane. That's going to take us a bit of money to do that, but hopefully, I know all that will be private equity money that funds those things. So we're going to have a bill. We toyed with it this year. We just ran out of time just because everybody didn't have their act together. And I knew, and Senator Gooch, Senator Dolezal, and all of us in leadership there knew we couldn't really do anything until we had our act together. So we made sure that we showed Georgians the proof and what we needed to do, just like any other that will be a fee or a tax or a impact fee or whatever we come up with, whatever we decide, I'll agree on, to make sure that we have the money to make Georgia safe, efficient, continue to grow in traffic and in traffic management.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think we're super fortunate to have Greg and Rick as our transportation chairs across the entire state. It gives Forsyth County basically the pole position. But one of the things that we also need to be thinking about, and we are, Greg, Rick, and everyone else is really around autonomy. If you've taken a look, I know Tesla's been mentioned twice now. Go to YouTube, look at Tesla 11.3 software in terms of self-driving. I believe strongly that by the middle of 2030, you are going to have effectively true autonomy on the roads, class 5 autonomy. What does that mean? First and foremost, you have greater throughput. On existing roads, you're going to get at least 200 to 300% more through those roads. So in terms of how we can use that money, may it be on maintenance, but as opposed to just picking up right-of-ways, easements, and then basically making expansions. I'm not trying at all to hurt our asphalt business, but effectively understand that there's going to be a combination of full autonomous vehicles along with those that we drive today. Japan right now in 2024 is moving 100 kilometers of one of their major highways to an exclusively autonomous lane because commercial vehicles will come in front of personal vehicles when it comes to autonomous, mainly because of the driver issue in terms of truck drivers, but also because of the fact that that is moving faster from a technology perspective than I'll say personal driving is. The second one, and I know I'm going to get called George Jetson when I say this, it is absolutely plausible that we have significant air taxi traffic within the next decade. And I think lifting traffic off of the roads and actually understanding how air traffic is going to be part of the solution, not the entire solution, just like your portfolio. You just don't have one stock, you have 100 stocks, but we are going to see more traffic lifted off of the roads into the air, and how it is that we're going to be able to coordinate air taxi as we hit toward the end of the 2020s and into the early 2030s.
George Jetson.
Anybody else? All right, thank you. So we'll jump subjects, and of course, I expect you all knew that I would be asking about this, but the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, the Forsyth County Development Authority, and the Forsyth County Chamber Board all voted unanimously on resolutions asking the delegation for local legislation on two items. One, authorizing legislation to give Forsyth County Board of Commissioners the authority to increase the hotel motel tax up to 8%. And two, authorizing legislation to give Forsyth County Board of Commissioners the authority to hold a countywide referendum on redevelopment powers, which many of our neighbors have, and that relates to economic development projects. The request regarding a change on hotel motel tax was in the last session, and it was before you in that session, and has come back before you in this session, and it has been supported by local hotel operators and the city of Cumming, as well as the BOC Development Authority and Chamber. So neither of those things came up as a bill or local legislation in this session. Why?
I'll start. I'm not afraid. You know, everybody looking to who's going to hold the microphone. I think you heard me, James, talk about it at the very beginning of my talk. You have 5 of the legislators that are in this group are new. Let that sink in just a minute. They're new to your delegation. And I think, and I'll just be very honest, you know, it is very difficult while we're in session, well, especially, I don't want to talk about myself and probably Greg and Todd, the position we're in leadership, in mine especially, just to have something dropped on you and say, do this. You know, that we need time to look at it, to evaluate it, to make sure if we need to put guardrails on something or if we don't, and to evaluate it properly. You know, that's just me. That's kind of the way I am. You know, and I think we need to look forward and look at down the road into 24, that we need to have meetings early in December, January. January's a little late. November, letting the county commission, letting the school board, letting you, your organization, know what you'd like for us to do, so we can ask questions, so we can evaluate on our time and our knowledge what we need to know to make sure we're doing the best thing for all of Forsyth County. And that's just my opinion that why it didn't move. But, you know, there's a lot going on in the legislature when we get down there. Many of y'all have been to see us and see how difficult it is just to sometimes meet with us because we have so many meetings that we have to go to kill bills, pass bills, further our own issues. Anybody else?
I would tell you that there's a common theme this last session that just was pervasive, and it's local control. And every single person on this panel, and those who couldn't be with us today, every single person says local control, local control, local control. In other words, people on this panel are not going to the Capitol to usurp local control, but rather to push decision-making back where it belongs, closer to the people. And so I think what you're going to see, there's probably one place that I think we came up short, but and those things tend to get more attention than the many, many, many things we do that are I'm so proud of. And it's almost so much stuff that the people on this panel and other delegation members did to promote and advance Forsyth County. You can't really unpack it in an hour, because you could go for 12 hours on all the things that the different people on this panel and the other delegation members were involved in this year. But that is a common theme. It's all about pushing control, retaining control with our county commissioners, our city council, our local elected officials, our school board, et cetera, and being a good advocate, to be a fierce advocate for this community down at the Capitol. And every single person on this panel feels exactly the same way. So to Rick's point, a lot of us are newer and sort of finding that rhythm that will work will quickly be achieved. The real goal for me over the time between sessions now and next January will be to spend a lot of time with the folks up here on this panel and others, with our local elected officials and the people in this room, so that we can make sure that we can be fierce advocates for this community. Georgia's the top place in the country to do business. Atlanta is one of the best cities in the country to do business. Forsyth County is arguably the best county in the state to do business. And that doesn't just happen. I've been here for 30 years. I've watched what this Chamber of Commerce has done. I've spent time with General Stein over there and hearing about the Development Authority. I talked to Alfred John and our other commissioners a lot. And you really have something, it's almost like a symphony. You can't have one person whacking away on the cymbals and another person beating the drums whenever they want. You got to bring it all together. We have such good problems in Forsyth County. We have, our schools are the envy of the state. I mean, we have such good problems here. What we have to do now is sort of round off some of the rougher edges. And I think you'll see that happen in the off season right now between sessions, where our delegation is finally coalescing together and working very closely with our county commission, our city council, our board of education, and our chamber and our development authority to kind of bring this thing all together. And you'll see it congeal this year, like a good old Jello salad or whatever. But anyway, I think you're going to see really great things out of this delegation. And it's only going to be great because it's not going to have anything to do with the delegation. It's going to have everything to do with the people in this room and us being great advocates for the people in this room to get them what they need, so that Forsyth County is the absolute undisputed champion in Georgia as far as places to do business and to exist and to raise a family and to educate your children.
I want to answer your question really directly. Our delegation rules require unanimous votes on any local legislation. So the reason we didn't have a floating homestead in 2019, when I first began to have that conversation, was because we didn't have unanimity among not only locals and our the Board of Ed, who we wanted to partner with on that, but with the delegation. And this gets to what Rick was talking about. We had, I think that we had a 5-person delegation last year. I think we're an 8-person delegation this year, with more than half of those people being new. So quite simply, we couldn't come to a unanimous agreement on those two issues. One of those issues, in fairness, was brought to us pretty late. The TAD issue, which is being driven by a local project, that was brought to us kind of mid-session. So I think that was, I'll give our delegation grace on that. I stood up sat in the pre-legislative breakfast and told you guys we would get the hotel motel done, which was unfair of me to do because I was kind of speaking out of turn for people that didn't even know what we were trying to do. But I think that you have to understand that for some people, and this is not an unfair position, but to arrive new into a delegation and then be asked to raise a tax 60%. It takes a second for some people to get there. It took a second for me to get there. Quite honestly, when I first heard about this a couple of years ago, but I told you guys that we were going to get it done this year. We didn't. The reason we didn't is because not everybody agreed. None of us are going to tell you who the people are that do and don't agree, because that's a bond that we have that we need to be able to keep that trust with each other. I can't tell you that we'll have that agreement next year. I can tell you that we're going to continue to have the conversation. We did not have the conversation lightly as a delegation. We did not have the conversation late. We did not have the conversation one time. We had it multiple times. So this is a function of people who were sent to the Capitol to represent your interests, trying to reach consensus. And until we do, some of these things will be in a state of limbo. I think that what Rick and Carter both mentioned about having these conversations early and often, so that people can understand the why behind the what. They may not agree with you. It may take a while to get that consensus. It took 4 years for us to get there on this floating homestead issue that we're talking, but we got there. So some of these things will take a little bit of time. and quite honestly, they're refined in the process. Floating homestead that we passed this year did not look the way that I would have written the bill. Well, I did write the bill 4 years ago, and the bill that we passed was different. The Board of Education had the idea of putting a sunset in so that we could evaluate it. That was a good idea. So there's a sunset in the bill. So some of these things actually are made better in the process. So oftentimes you take a loss and you come back with a better product in the end, which hopefully is what we're able to do. If not on this, then on all the other local issues as well.
So let me, and thank you for that. So let me dig in just because you raised something that has come up as a submitted question as well, and that is related to the rules that you just mentioned about local legislation, that they're unanimous. The other part of that, so one of the questions, there's been some discussion regarding whether or not discussion and votes within the delegation about local legislation are kept secret. Is that accurate? And what's the purpose of keeping those secrets?
That's just the answer to that's yes. And that's a tradition that I just inherited. I think all of us inherited that. And you can make arguments for both ways. You can make arguments that we should go fight with each other on TV and stream that live. And there probably would be some benefit to that. You can make arguments that in order for us to work well together, we need to be able to be honest with each other and have certain conversations in private. And there's obviously a benefit to that. The House delegation can change their rules if they want to. The Senate delegation can change their rules if they want to. I think that probably there's differing opinions on this board. I think at the table as to whether or not we should keep the requirement to be unanimous. I will tell you this, that I'll take redistricting as an example, which is probably as bloody of an issue as we've been through since I've been here as far as it relates to local legislation. The delegation got to a point that we drew what I think are good lines. They weren't the lines that we initially drew. They weren't the lines that the locals drew. They weren't, but it was a process of working its way through to ultimately getting to a place where not everybody got everything they wanted, but I think that you got balance. And I think that if you create a system that allows one person to call it go rogue, and then you create a system that allows them to talk about it, you are going to have incredible potential fracturing within this delegation. Let's just pretend for a second that I want to be the most conservative no tax guy, right? And I'm going to vote against TAS. I'm going to vote against hotel motel. I'm going to vote against everything else. And I'm going to vote against 4% for floating homestead. Well, now I put them in a box where I'm out publicly bashing them and they don't want to work with me. I go score political points. It just creates for an unhealthy environment. Is the system that we have perfect? No, of course it's not perfect. No system is. But it requires us to work together and requires us to build trust. And to the extent that the voters don't like the job that any of us are doing, we'll be replaced. But I think that I'm in favor of continuing to work through the process that we have. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to why they think they should change it or undergird that. Either way is fine. But I say all that just speaking for myself.
I just want to say, just quick as it goes down, we'll all take a turn on this. And Greg is absolutely right. And something he said before is this a process. And the way the legislature works is not generally instantaneous decisions with results that click of your finger. Usually these things take years. The best things take years, and throwing each other under the bus as it would be very detrimental to us all working together and trusting one another in a room when we are talking honestly and directly to one another and making sure we do the right thing. So I thank you, Greg, for saying
that. Senator Dolezal mentioned about the Senate has their delegation rules, House has their delegation rules. We as a House delegation of my freshman year, we did change our delegation rules to have we could have one descending vote. Every 2 years, you've got to establish your delegation rules, or if you do not establish them, everything has to be unanimous. So this year we kept our rules as the established rules of the House delegation, that you have to stay unanimous in your votes. The process that I mentioned earlier, working through with the school homestead exemption, I hope and challenge the chamber and the motel, hotel owners in this community and the commissioners. I'd like to get together and start this conversation now, to sit down with them, to show that they support doing this, we know the commissioners did a unanimous resolution to support doing this. But the success is starting the conversation. And that's what I'd like to see. We all talked about it, worked with the TAD thing that Senator Dole's all talked about. That was all new to me about 3/4 through the session, and I did want to learn a little bit more about it and the effects it has, pro and con, with our neighbors. But it's we've got to continue to work, as we've all said, with our delegation, both House and Senate, and then come together as unite delegation to move these local issues through.
Thank you. So I want to jump just quickly to T-Splost, actually. So we're talking about transportation funding and where that potentially could head. With the loss of T-Splost, and Chairman John in the State of the County address made it very clear that the county's very serious about taking in the concerns of voters that may not have voted for it and what those are, and having a process of addressing that. So when we look forward, assuming that those issues are addressed thoughtfully, and it is back on the ballot, is T-Splost something that you all as leaders in transportation would support?
I guess that's you and I, Greg. I would. I think when we had the transportation summit earlier, I think it's very important that in a growing community like Forsyth County, that you take control of your destination, your destiny. And that's what T-Splost would label you to do. Go back to what I said a minute ago. And Greg and I said $3 billion divided by 159 counties. I think Russell McMurray said that when he was here. So what we can do as a state's limited, but what you can do yourself is unlimited. And it puts you, I think you do need to listen to the community and see what was it they didn't like. Is there some things that you can do to make it more applicable and votable? But that's a great choice that people need to make. I think they sent a pretty good message in this last one that there's some things they didn't like, and I think you have to go back to the drawing books with the commissioners and try to make that fit.
I hadn't heard. I was at the Capitol when Commissioner John gave that address. I'm actually happy to hear that, because some of the feedback that I've heard is, oh, voters didn't understand what they were voting for. Oh, if we just had done this or done that. And I think that that's probably the wrong message to take away from that election. I don't think that your voters in the most educated, wealthiest county in the state were voting in an uneducated manner. In fact, I would say that for somebody to vote no on something is an outlier. If you look at all those referendum questions, they all received yeses. So for all yeses to flip to a no is a pretty intentional vote. And I think that we need to listen to what our community is telling us. Look, T-Splost is a choice of locals. I'm not going to inject myself into that decision. I get one vote on that, just like the other 250,000 people in this county. I will say that I think consumption taxes are far preferable to either sales taxes, to property taxes or income taxes. So I'm a general consumption tax person. I would love to see the state move away from taxing labor and productivity and towards taxing consumption in general. So principally, I'm there. But I think our voters sent us a pretty clear message. And I think that I love to hear my good friend, Chairman John, say that they're going to listen and dig in and figure that out. And I trust that they will. And we'll see what happens. And I'll be in the ballot box just like everybody else is.
Thank you. Anyone else want to? All right. So workforce development continues to be the number one challenge, I suspect, across the state of Georgia. It's certainly true here of local employers. We hear it over and over and over again. Just a quick round of the room. Anyone here who's an employer not struggling with hiring people? Anybody just knocking it out of the park? So we hear that again and again. What steps were or do you anticipate the legislature taking to help us as a state better address that?
we're going to continue. And when I say we, the Technology Infrastructure and Innovation Committee, we're going to continue to kind of look to see where the hockey puck is going. At this point, I'll say the people within either the workforce today or that are coming into the workforce, say within the next 5 years, say those kids that are in 8th grade or 9th grade, I think at this point where we're at is that we can start to refine around the edges. But I think the bigger question starts to become is how we can prepare for 2030 and beyond. But let me just first talk about where the puck's at today. I think ultimately, when you look at our education system, Arne Duncan, who I rarely quote, he was the first education secretary for President Obama. So you can probably imagine I don't agree with probably anything that he believes in. But he did say something very profound at the Excel and Ed conference about 6-7 years ago. He said, education, it's the only profession that I could dig someone up from 50 years ago. And other than the transformation from the blackboard to the whiteboard, what has really occurred? We built our entire education system on silos. There's pre-K4, there's K-12, there's TCSG, there's USG, et cetera. There is no one wave in terms of pathways. And for that, I understand why we did that. Coming out of Reconstruction, our graduation rate was anywhere between 5 and 10%. We had a huge, believe it or not, issue with truancy. I'm sure you're not shocked by that in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then ultimately with the Industrial Revolution, we started to see a change in terms of how it is that we brought children through K through 12. We went from literally single-digit high school graduation rates all the way up into around the 80s, around the LBJ time. And then ultimately with the Great Society, we've now seen graduation rates go from here all the way down to here. Now, we can have a huge conversation around what's occurred from the LBJ administration to now, but ultimately we have to understand where that all occurred and what the root causes were. I think what we're not doing is, and what we have continued to do is about 20 years ago, it became the right thing to do in terms of saying trade school isn't the place to go. You have to go higher ed. I think ultimately we have to be saying to ourselves, military, TCSG, and USG are an option. We have to be able to get the child through K-12, but we have to get them to one of those 3 options. We know that because of the fact if we get them to one of those 3 options, A, we have more people raising their hands saying, I got the proper workforce, but B, what is it in terms of, I'm just saying from a societal standpoint. I won't go into the incarceration rate of people who aren't graduating from high school. I won't go into those that are still on, I'll say, the social dime in terms of the generational dime in terms of those that don't either graduate from high school or don't go somewhere beyond high school. I think ultimately the other thing that we need to be looking at is also JIT in terms of just-in-time training. We've seen so many industries that have not taken advantage of effectively micro-learning opportunities. We don't see that. We don't see the fact that we aren't encouraging children to be able to maybe in 8th or 9th grade to start picking a pathway. Now, with the cooperation of David Morling, and he's back there in the back left, and I'm glad that you're here, David, we have been able to, and kudos to Chairman Jaspers and kudos to Chairman Dolezal also. One of the examples that we were doing is pushing down into high school is effectively heavy equipment operation. Sorry, I can't tell you everything that happens with a backhoe and a front loader and things like that, but you know what? Kids here in Forsyth County can, and it's an opportunity for them to basically come out of high school, not just with a diploma, but also with a certification. I think being able to lift the value of a certification is really something that we need to be able to do. My 3rd son, 36 on the ACT, not to brag, 1580 on the SAT. Guess where he graduated from? After South. Nowhere. He went right into coding, and the kid is 21 years old, and he's well above the median average in terms of Forsyth County salaries. Why? Because he got a skill that you guys value, which is coding, and he's doing great at it. He's a smart kid. We normally would have seen him go to somewhere like Tech, definitely not Georgia, but definitely Tech, and I think it's something that would have helped us. But I think ultimately, the last thing that I'll say, and sorry for taking so much time, but I'm pretty passionate about this, is that we have seen, and again, sorry, David, I want to pick on you again. We have seen industries like those that David represents in terms of roads, asphalt, et cetera, heavy equipment, them partnering with K-12. And here in Forsyth County, you've done that. You've done that with the state too, and we appreciate that. The more that you partner with us, and the auto dealers are doing that now. We hear from them all the time. We could hire literally unlimited number of mechanics, unlimited number of body shop people. If we can get, to Chairman Jasper's point, more private-public partnership, he was referring to roads. I think he would agree we could extend that, right, Mr. Chairman, to also workforce development, The more we hear from you, the more we can back into where the budget investments are going to be and what we can do from basically 8th grade up. And I think that's super important.
And I just want to add just a couple of things to Todd. You know, workforce that you're needing is in your high schools. And, you know, Superintendent Bearden and you have invested a great deal in CTAE in Forsyth County as a third part, and it's fabulous. I was the chairman of education K-12 for a few years, and I'm still the chairman of the CTAE oversight. It's where I go and see all across the state what CTA is doing, training workers for you, James, and your members on how to walk right into your place of business and do work. If you're a business owner and you're not supporting the local high school's CTAE program that's in your area, you're missing out on some great employees so that they get to know you and you can go work for some of them at half day. There's all these opportunities where you need to reach out and touch these kids that can become great employees for you. And, you know, one thing we did this year, you've heard us of a group called Mountain Education. We made sure that stayed inactive, you know, because that's the group, the education group that's taken the kids that have dropped out that you might not want, that we help them through Mountain Education, alternative education, to get that high school diploma and job skills and things they need so they can be an active person in your place of business. So we continually look at all these things to make sure we get them done.
Very good. Thank you.
James, I'm going to jump in for 1 second too, because I intentionally asked you're allowed to get ask for 3 committees when you're a freshman. And my first committee that I requested was higher education, because we've got Lanier Tech and University of North Georgia right here in our county. And it's like we're so close in Forsyth County to having it just right between our high school system. It's shocking. I asked for that because the new chancellor Purdue, Sonny Purdue, was going to be head of this year, and I thought he's going to do something. It'll be interesting to watch, and I would want to be there. But we're so close with our schools. I heard Valerie Lowe's name so many times at the Capitol. It's so weird. Like, Valerie Lowe's doing great stuff up there in Forsyth County. We're so close to kind of gluing it all together between the great work we're doing with our I mean, we've got 50 different career pathways in Forsyth County Public Schools. That's shocking to me. We're so far ahead of the rest of the world, and they're kind of, and workforce development was a common theme all session. And I thought, yeah, we're doing that in Forsyth County. Yeah, we're doing that too. We're doing that too. But weaving it together between with the great stuff we're doing in our high schools here and our career pathways, having University of North Georgia right up the street where your kids could go do a dual enrollment and get their associate's degree before they ever graduate from high school. You know, inflation's a big deal. What does that mean to typical families in Forsyth County when your kid can be halfway done with their college before they ever graduate from high school? Forsyth County. So weaving it together between the great stuff they're doing with pathways in our high schools, having Lanier Tech right down the street, University of North Georgia right up the road. We're so close. We really are the tip of the spear on workforce development, I think, in the whole state. And I keep hearing common themes down there at the Capitol that resonate. Like, yeah, we're doing that in Forsyth County. So whatever we're doing, let's put it on steroids and keep going.
Thank you. So we're down to the last just few minutes, and one thing, a topic that came up the last really seemingly hours of the session centered around, and to be very candid, it was very hard to see how it was going and what the actual issues were surrounding it, but certificate of need and the discussion around hospitals. And I realized the conversation was primarily around rural hospitals, but can you give us a summary of kind of what actually did happen and what you see or what you want to see happen in the future? And I realize everybody's got a different view, and we've just got a few minutes. But
yes, I'll zoom out quickly to tell the people in the room that aren't in healthcare what certificate of need is. Certificate of need is a regulatory mechanism that was actually put in place back in the Ford administration. So certificate of need is older than me. And it is a process by which healthcare providers need to petition the state to open or expand healthcare facilities. Let's just pretend, for example, that you want to open an MRI imaging center across the street. You would need to petition the government. Whoever has a certificate of need within a 35-mile radius can object to that. and can essentially prevent you from doing anything from building a new hospital to expanding an existing facility or even just buying a second MRI machine. There's an open certificate of need, I think, right now in Forsyth County for a business that wants to buy an additional MRI machine. And there's a regulatory process that you have to go through. The feds, interestingly enough, required certificate of need back in the 70s. Within 10 years, they repealed it. So since then, what you've seen is different states do different things. Georgia has significantly altered their certificate of need. A number of states have completely gotten rid of certificate of need. It was one of the first things Governor DeSantis did in Florida when he got elected. Interestingly enough, you have Florida at one end of the spectrum that's eliminated certificate of need, and California has eliminated certificate of need. So two of your, it's not like these are just red states that are doing this. I had a bill, Senate Bill 99, there was going to be a very narrow carve out for certificate of need that was going to eliminate certificate of need requirements in rural Georgia for the construction of what's called an acute care hospital. Because we have seen hospital construction be prevented in rural Georgia, state-of-the-art hospitals not be able to be built because literally a 60-year-old 30-bed hospital is objecting to it. And it's not something that any of us would say is a good thing if we were to design a healthcare system from scratch. Excuse me. What happened on certificate of need this year? Nothing. We reached a stalemate, so nothing happened. I'm going to be chairing a study committee in the Senate this year. There's, I think, a study committee in the House as well on CON. So we're going to continue to have the dialogue because you cannot simultaneously say, in my opinion, healthcare is terrible in rural Georgia. There's no access to healthcare. What are we going to do about it? Nothing. We're going to stand up a tax credit system and give donations to existing facilities, but never expand hospitals. There's a study done by George Mason University that said that if we would do something similar to the bill that I had, that we would see the hospitals in rural Georgia expand in terms of count, the number of hospitals expand by about 20% in the state. And we don't live with the reality of not knowing what it's like to live in a community where you don't have a hospital, because we have a phenomenal hospital here. But hospitals are part and parcel for economic development. You cannot revitalize rural Georgia, which is quite literally in many cases dying on the vine, without addressing the healthcare conversation as well, because nobody wants to live in a place where they're 2 hours away from a hospital. It's just a reality. So we're in active conversations on that. That's a passion of the lieutenant governors. I know the speaker and Chairman Cooper moved a study committee bill through on that side as well. So we'll see what happens in the future. My guess is that it will continue to be incremental change. And that's not the worst thing in the world, but I think that we need to, obviously I believe in change because I presented a bill to change it. We got that bill actually out of the Senate. We had, I think, 42 votes out of 56 in the Senate. So we had bipartisan support in the Senate. And then it kind of stalled out in some conversations in the House, but that bill is still alive in the House. So we can, re-energize those conversations. Chairman Jones is on the committee that heard that bill, and we'll see what happens next session.
What I would add to that too is specifically why that kind of fell apart at the end is Wellstar Health System, which was part of the AMC closure in South Fulton. They're also partnering with Medical College of Georgia. And so because Wellstar is in the middle of all of that, a lot of the questions on CON revolved around Wellstar. And the legislature, I think, believe that we just probably need to pump the brakes on anything until that gets sorted out.
Very good. Anybody else?
I'll just throw a little bit, maybe different light on it. I found that in my 13 years that there are 3 subjects that hire every lobbyist in the Capitol. Truck weights is one of them. CON is the other, and the others is the budget. And casino, not really. Casino gambling, sports betting, maybe. But because, and I'll tell you why. I've been the chairman of the Rural Development Council for the last 3 years. I was on it since its inception by Speaker Ralston. You don't know what that is probably, but it was a group put together by Speaker Ralston to look at issues facing rural Georgia. And wherever we meet all over the state, healthcare is number one. And I've been to every nook and cranny of the state of Georgia over the last 6 or 8 years. It's been a great opportunity for me. And what drives it is fear. As Greg said a minute ago, if you're in a community below the fall line, that's below Macon, and your hospital has closed or is in the process of closing, we had some in North Georgia that were in the process of closing, you're looking for every booger man in the room. You're trying to find it. And fear of your losing your primary care hospital drives this. And it is fear. It's the tragedy of a hospital closing that does it. You know, South Georgia's decreasing population. Most of us that question doing away with CON are really looking at how does it affect a hospital in Vidalia? Most of y'all don't even know where Vidalia is, but it's got a thriving hospital. And we know that with, you know, Greg's bill is very targeted, but the overall idea of doing away with CON is what enters the room. And, you know, when they think of somebody like a private equity company coming in, putting a surgery center, radiation or radiology, whatever, in Vidalia, would it close the Vidalia hospital? It might, because that's a profit center. There are not many profit centers in general hospitals. And it's about how do we make sure that those hospitals across the state remain strong or at least survival. And the state of Georgia puts a lot of money into them. We all work very hard to make sure those rural hospitals survive throughout the safety net of our state. You know, we're fortunate here. We're in an arc of fabulous health care. But you got to get out in the state and really look at it to think about what CON does and what it could or couldn't do across the state.
Thank you. So we are out of time. Thank you all so much for, would you like to talk? If you'd like to, please.
I'll just add this to Chairman Jasper's point and Chairman Dolezal's point. The last stats I read were like about 12 months ago, 9 counties without a doctor, upwards of 30 without an OBGYN. So this is something that we take very seriously. Now, that stated, I am on the committee. Like Greg said, I was going to vote yes because I do think it was a targeted measure. But there's another bill that's in around a pilot that would redistribute the nonprofit benefit, because we do need to start thinking about statewide. When we put in the nonprofit benefit about a century ago, the idea was to push down to 100, back then we had more than 159 counties, but let's just say 159 counties. And right now we're not seeing the nonprofit benefit spread evenly across the 159. So how can that nonprofit benefit be more adequately moved to ensure that especially the counties with no doctor and those counties without specialists are able to get the medical care that they need? Because to Greg's point, we will not see growth no matter what we do to place companies down into the southern part of our state. We can't see growth unless we have healthcare, unless we have proper education, et cetera. So all these things are intertwined, and we're going to continue to push on that. But I think CON in a targeted way is definitely an option for us that I'm excited about. But I think also looking at the nonprofit benefit is something that we need to be seriously thinking about too. So thank you.
Thank you. So serving in any public office, but particularly the legislature, is a dirty, thankless job, and we appreciate the good work that you do for all of us. Thank you very much, which goes nicely with the four-way test for our Rotary Club. So if you all will join me for the Rotarians, if you would join me in the four-way test. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you all. Have a great day.
Well done, James. Good job.